Well, welcome everyone to this special edition of Become More Live, where I, Pastor Jeremy, pastor and chief joy officer at the United Methodist Church Johnstown, sit down with some interesting folks to talk about something poignant and of the times. And I am super excited to welcome a couple of guests. So whether you're joining us live or you're listening to this later, on our podcast, I'm sure you are going to enjoy this conversation as I'm going to enjoy it. And so I want to introduce Gary Lebsack, mayor of our fine town of Johnstown, and Chad Young, who serves in many roles, but also as a town council person here for our great city of Johnstown. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I might add that Chad is Mayor Pro Tem. He's number 2 in line here.
Oh, I did not know that. I did not know that. Okay, there you go. Well, that's good. Mayor Young sounds good to me. I'm down. That's
problem is that that's a heartbeat away from being the mayor. So I want to keep my heart going.
There you go. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. All right. Well, I'm glad you're here. Obviously, politics on everybody's mind right here, right now, and I don't know if there's anything you really can say like about the national race and everything that isn't being said a million times. But there is something I find missing personally in the conversation that I thought it'd be fun to talk to you guys about, which is, as people of faith, that has, our faith obviously informs all aspects of our lives. Of course, it's going to inform, our politics and the things that we do and support there. But also, we are, as people of faith, called to this really high standard of loving our neighbor. And what does loving your neighbor look like, now, and how do we get through this next week, where whatever happens on Tuesday, half the country is going to be unhappy and half the country is going to be excited, and how do we continue to love and support one another? Maybe even including that neighbor who lives next to you who has a different yard sign than you have, right? I think that's some of the challenges right now that we're dealing with. But I want to start off with a question for each of you, which is, so you both serve in an elected position. So what made you want to do that? What made you want to serve in that way? And maybe Chad, we'll start with you. What made you want to serve in that an elected position to serve your community?
For me, it was my family has come from a service background, and both of my granddads served on city councils here locally. And so it was just a part of my makeup, really, to help to serve others. And my grandpa always used to say, if you want to make something better or affect change, you just have to get involved. And so for me, growth was really taking off. The onset of growth was exploding here in Johnstown, and that was a concern of mine. And so I talked to my granddad, and he said, if you want to see change and be a part of that change, you have to get involved. And so it was just a great conversation to have with him. And I dove in, and fortunately, I've been able to serve for a number of years. I did finish, I think it was 3 or 4 terms, gosh. And then I went off the board, and then I was asked to come back and fill another position, a term that had been vacated, and then ran again in the subsequent election. And so here we are.
What have you experienced? What have you experienced to be the most rewarding part of being in an elected office?
I think seeing a number of things that we've been able to accomplish for the greater good of the community. From, of course, new homes creates new opportunities, and in some instances creates some issues that aren't always as positive. But for the most part, I think we've really grown smart and we've been able to do a lot of things because we have been growing smart. I think for me, I serve as the liaison to the Historical Society, as well as on our library board. And so to see the completion of the library, and now we've gone through a renovation and a rehab kind of, for something that wasn't so great. But it's turned out to be a positive outcome for us. So those things are great. And, near and dear to Gary, of course, the YMCA, our new city hall, the police station, and that we've been fortunate enough, to be able to pay for those items and not have to go into debt as well.
It's been great. As someone new, still kind of who still feels sort of new to this community. I mean, I think the work that's been done over the last several years, you can just see it, and it's amazing. It's impressive, and sometimes point out like, oh, where this used to be, and I'm like, oh, really? It's a lot better now. So that's just some good hard work on your all's part, and I appreciate it. So Gary, kind of the same question. What made you want to get involved in serving in an elected capacity?
Well, it's kind of like Chad. My family was always involved in the community, and you see your folks doing that. So I think it's just part of your DNA as you grow up. But my dad always said, you should be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And he said, if you don't put yourself out there, you really can't complain. And so those are some things that, I was taught early on. And all growing up, I always tried to take part in things that would involve the community and would possibly make things better for the community. And so when the time came that there was a developer that wanted our farm worse than I guess we did, and so we sold the farm and started the process through the town to get it annexed and get it platted. And of course, they don't write you the check till you have it platted. And so going through planning and zoning and watching the process, and when it was all said and done, I thought, this is my community. I was born and raised here, and I'd really like to see it continue to grow, but in a responsible way. And having a pretty good knowledge of the lay of the land, since I've lived here my entire life, and the knowledge of water and some things that I knew that would be very important in the future, I thought, why not? I'll give it a shot. So I run for town council and was elected. And I've just finished 16 years. I've started my 17th year this year, the election of mayor. So that's my background, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I love it. People say, I can't believe that you love doing that, and I do. I honestly love doing what I'm doing because I really think that our council, our staff, we're doing some good things for this community. And this is a community that I keep saying is probably the biggest small community along the Front Range, because we think big, we have big ideas, but we carry out the ideas that we have. And so that's why I'm here. I'm proud to be here, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's great, Gary. I appreciate it. So I guess I didn't realize you guys were so long tenured, in your positions. And I love that you both talked about motivations. I think the reason why you do things is oftentimes, the most important, and if you get into it with a service mentality that I'm here to, serve the community, I think that's what we need to be about. I'm curious, in your tenure, without obviously naming names or anything like that, have you seen people get involved for maybe the wrong reasons? Or and what does that look like, and what does that mean, when you are trying to do it for the greater good? When people come in with maybe stronger agendas, how does that shift the dynamic amongst the council and that sort of thing?
Well, I guess I'll start with that, Chad, if you don't mind. But yeah, we've had people that with maybe they did it for I guess for the glory. There's no glory in this. This is a service thing that we're not here to make a name for ourselves. We're here to make things right for the community. But I've noticed that when people come in for the wrong reason, they fade pretty fast because I think they finally come to the realization that this is a bigger than they are, and it's it's not about me, it's about us. And so I think they finally catch on to the fact that this is a serious thing that we're doing for a lot of people.
Yeah. Chad, what do you think?
Well, and I would say too that I think my career kind of has prepared me somewhat. I think you have to have a servant heart to be in this role. As Gary mentioned, those that come in with an agenda, they just don't last long. And I think just thinking over the years, lots of people have left. They've moved here thinking that they're going to conquer the world, and find out that it doesn't work, and they move away. And in the meantime, it's created, some bad juju, if you want, for the town. But we always come out of it better. And I think that's evident by the people that have stepped in to serve as well. That we're pretty fortunate with this council that we have currently, and we've had great councils in the past as well.
So when the goal is to serve, obviously, and you both talked about the development in the community, which is very obvious, but that has to lead sometimes to having to make decisions that are controversial, that not everyone is going to agree with. And there's times that maybe even a majority of people, by whatever estimation you would use, but maybe even a majority of people don't support something, but in your heart of hearts, it's in the best interest of this community long term. How do you approach those controversial decisions? As far as what do you think through? What are you thinking about when you're faced with those kind of choices?
Well, for me, I first of all, I have to take my personal feelings out of the equation. When you're dealing with things that affect the entire community, a lot of times how I feel personally isn't necessarily what's right for the community. And so we surround ourselves with great people. We have a great staff. We get great information. And with that, we're able to make a decision that's right for the community and not what's always right for us. I mean, there's been times where I've thought, man, I don't like doing that, but in the long run, it's better for everybody. So I kind of have to take my personal feelings out of the equation from time to time. And the good thing is that our council and our staff, we have a lot of respect for each other. So when you have that respect, you can lean on others to make that decision that sometimes is hard to do. I mean, frankly, you're affecting the lives of everybody that is involved. And that's how I do it. I just kind of remove my own personal feelings.
And I think too, there's lots of research and lots of reading, and that we're listening to both sides of an issue, and keeping that open mind, until that vote is called in. And for me personally too, some of those decisions aren't made until the vote is called for. And so, that again, agree with Gary that it's not about us personally, but what's best for the greater good of the community, and just being mindful of that. But being convicted to that decision as well.
So I like what you both shared, and I think it's really important. I think one of the challenges that you all are probably in, face, and Gary, you alluded to it, is sometimes you basically have to do something that's against your own self-interest, right? Like you look at this and go, well, what's best for maybe me as an individual is this, but collectively we need to go like the other decision is actually the right one, even if it's not, in my personal, going to be the personally best thing for me. So I imagine those are challenges that come up, maybe not frequently, but are not uncommon in your world.
Sometimes we have to make a decision where it's going to cost individuals something, but those individuals may not like it, but they have to realize that we're taking part of that cost too. If somebody's rates get increased, so do ours. I mean, and we're human.
Yeah.
We don't like it, but we know what's the good of the community. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. A lot of times people don't realize that what we decide affects us just as much as it affects the next person.
So one of the things I'm struck as we're talking here, and I'm going to be careful a little how far down this path we go. But in the way you guys are describing it in your role and approaching this kind of like with a servant's heart and this idea of really wanting to work for the greater good, I think, at kind of a local level, we recognize that if our process is going to function, you kind of have to do it that right? It's just like, it's just really not going to work otherwise. But it seems to me, just looking at kind of the larger state and national picture when it comes to politics, the farther away you get from the local level, the less it seems to be about that, right? I don't hear anybody. I mean, this is taking sides here. I mean, I don't hear anybody really talking about, oftentimes talking about it in these same terms. So, like, do you guys find it frustrating when it does seem like agenda and ego, and having power or fame or whatever it is you're looking for seems to be a lot more, seems to be a lot more present, in like the wider, in both the state and national political process? Because that seems to be all a personality contest now to me, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, but I think, unfortunately, what plays into that is the fundraising and campaigning, and people are buying votes, and the moral compass just has a tendency to fade away, and so I think that's the unfortunate part of getting into these bigger campaigns, that people lose sight of communities or people back home. And it just gets so far removed from reality for a lot of those professional politicians.
I've always been brought up to respect others' opinions. I don't necessarily have to agree, but I'll respect them. And, I don't have to live by them, but I will respect them. And I think what's really refreshing about our council, and a lot of councils that I know of, is that we're apolitical. We don't care what side of the aisle you're on. We respect one another, and we don't get into that us against them mentality that we see on the national level. I think we're there all for the same reason. So that's very refreshing for me, because I don't think I could do this if we had to battle about the us against them deal that goes on nationally.
Right. So, and town council, I mean, I'm sure here and in most places anyway, those are nonpartisan elections, right? I mean, I remember voting for you, Gary, and there wasn't anything next to your name. There was not an R or D and I or anything, right? Nope. I mean, that's, and I know, and I guess I haven't said this, I suppose I serve in an elected position as myself on the school board. Those are nonpartisans. Mm-hmm. I'm a little surprised. It made me aware of how quickly, though, those labels come into our politics, right? Like like as a local school board member, I don't have anything by my name, but the state school board does, right? I mean, they have a political affiliation. You guys don't, but the county commissioners do, right? I mean, it's just you second you step out of this like this world of like very local governance, and suddenly what you just said, Gary, like whose team are you on? You got to pick a team. And then I think that I think that shifts the dynamic tremendously. And I, because because in this case you're actually voting. In your case, you're running as you, right? You're running as Chad. You're running as Gary. And on that, and I think the second it enters that world of us versus them, and you start to get camps forming and things like that, then that's when I think the less glamorous side, of the whole process comes out.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Yeah. Because then, when you have let's just say we have two political parties represented on a board or a council, then all of a sudden, like you say, you get back channel decisions that we're going to vote against this because they're voting for it. We don't like it. They like it. And then you become counterproductive. I mean, you don't get anything done. Mm-hmm. And we serve to get things done. I mean, thank goodness, and we do. I'm doing a thing right now where I'm going to make an end of the year report on what the town has done this last year. And so I asked our town manager if he could put together a list of what he thought we've accomplished. It's 3 pages long. You don't get to that point if you have two factions fighting against each other.
Right. But I also think you get to that point when your goal is to actually get some stuff done, versus what I think sometimes it turns into is the goal becomes winning.
Right.
I mean, if it's about winning and who won and who gets to take credit and things like that, then you've probably strayed from the path a little bit. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about, especially is interested in talking to both of you, is I know you're also both people of faith, and of course, obviously we live in a world where, our separation of church and state and all that thing, which I think is actually a good thing. I'm glad we don't have a state church. Like I'm a big separation of church and state guy. All you got to do is go to Europe where they have all those state churches, none of which are doing very well to recognize whether that's a bad idea. So I'm fine with it, but I think but I don't know as a person how to separate, my faith from all the rest of my life. I mean, it really is the foundation I stand on for so many things. So of course my faith informs my decision making, both as a person, as a voter, as a school board member, as whatever capacity I'm in. It's there. I try to use it as the lens I see the world through. Do you think your faith informs how you serve in this role, or decisions that you are making for one another?
Absolutely. For me, it is. Being prayerful, being mindful. I think thinking about somebody's honesty and their character and their integrity, that they're genuine. I think those are big pieces that play into people's faith. And so for me personally, absolutely.
We got these questions ahead of time, so this one I pondered a lot because, and I guess I just have to go back to the beginning. I was born and raised in the UB church, now the Methodist church. We were brought up with the fear of God in mind on everything we did, and that's a good thing. When we went through grade school, we actually said the Lord's Prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance, and I think that builds a foundation in everyone that I think we're missing a little bit today. That foundation teaches you that you don't win all the time. And there's plenty of Bible stories that point that out. That there's a lot of toil and trouble and losses, but there's a lot of gains too. And I think through your faith, you learn how to handle those types of things. Sure, we have losses, we have disappointments, but we understand that that's life. And I think a little of that is missing today. I really do.
But I also think too that catastrophic events, I think, bring people back to faith. And so, I think of 9/11, and I think of the wildfires here in Colorado, and of all of these natural disasters that that people become more mindful too of their faith. And unfortunately, that we're not able to worship together face to face. That we can't really see that right now. That there's a resurgence of people coming back to houses of worship. But it was evident, after 9/11, that churches were filling up, and so I think, unfortunately, Gary mentioned, we've lost some of that focus throughout time. And it's unfortunate that we've had some of these catastrophic events, but the good thing is that it does bring people maybe more centered in their faith, or that they focus on it maybe a little bit more, or have a greater appreciation for it.
It's interesting that you bring that up, Chad, because one of the things it's a story that I hear a lot around our church is, from basically spouses who are, because we're streaming and everything like that, spouses who are like, who have a spouse that, didn't attend or attended really infrequently, are now like, he sits on the couch with me every Sunday and watches church with me, or, my kids are getting involved, and I've gotten notes and cards from people who were probably would never on their own have come in person. Like, that was just a little bit of a bridge too far. But now that mom or dad is watching it, or, wife or husband's watching it, or sister brother's watching it, or whatever, suddenly they're in that mix too. So you're right. Like, it's that part has been, that's kind of leaning into the, never waste a crisis. I think that's like a Rahm Emanuel quote or something like that. Never waste a good crisis. I think that's one of those times where it's interesting to see kind of how the Holy Spirit and God is working, through this time to reach people that, frankly, we probably wouldn't have gotten a chance to before. Sure. Are you all seeing? I mean, are you seeing different kind of? I hate to even say opportunities, because God, with everything going on, you hate to think about it in those terms, but there really are. I mean, there are, there are opportunities, things that are open now because, we just got to figure this stuff out, right? Like, we just got to figure out what we're doing. Have you seen similar kind of opportunities on your all's work, as far as things that seem possible now that probably didn't seem possible to, even last year?
Well, we didn't have the ability to have a Zoom meeting. We didn't have the ability to pass a resolution or do any kind of business via Zoom or via out of office, out of chamber type situations. And so that has made a big difference. And I think, to your point, we get people online asking questions that probably would never come into a council chamber. For what reason, I don't know. We don't bite, and it's nice to have people there. But there's opportunities for people to become maybe a little more involved, or are getting some of their questions answered that they wouldn't have normally. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too that, we've just really had to find creative ways to make things happen. And I think that's, in any realm of anybody's jobs, or their daily lives, that they just have to find ways to make it work, for them, or their families.
So, and I think this is also another one of those places where I think being a person of faith comes into it, because one of the things that you recognize, to turn into any random page in the Bible, and you're gonna find a story about people going through hard times, right? Just pick any random page, and guaranteed, within a chapter or two, wherever it is you're looking, there's somebody who's going to go through some hard times. And that's what it is. It's over and over and over again. But it's also stories over and over again, people coming through those hard times, being transformed, by it. And I think one of the things that be having that kind of background and that kind of basically faith and trust that, despite everything going on, and maybe some evidence to the contrary, there is a God, and God is still God. And it's our job, not to figure everything out, not to do everything, but just to do our part and be faithful and trust that there is a path through it. And I think that can give you the confidence, right, to try some stuff, and some confidence to be willing to fail, right? I mean, pick any other random page of the Bible, you'll get a story of somebody failing, right? So I think that's part of it too. For me anyway, I feel that way, that it's the hope. I need that hope now more than ever, but it's that hope that lets me go, okay, I can't have 150 people in my building right now. What can I do? Right? Like how do we provide the good news now? Because I trust and believe that God still wants the good news shared, right? That this Holy Spirit's still working. We just got to figure out where. So sometimes I think that helps you be lets you be the calm person in the room, right, when things are going down. So I'm wondering if that jives with you. Does that sound familiar?
Jeb?
Yeah, definitely. I think you just looking for those creative ways to make things happen. Again, for the greater good of people. I think trying something once, to see if it's going to work or not. We don't know unless we try. And so.
Yeah, and we don't have to know everything, because we can't. I think that's the other thing that our faith helps us understand, is we can't know everything, right?
But I mean, we're also stepping out in faith.
Yeah. Yeah. If we knew exactly what was going to happen, we wouldn't call it faith, right?
Sure.
Right?
Well, and I think my faith has taught me how to treat people. That's very important. I mean, like I said earlier, you don't have to agree with everything from everyone, but through faith, you learn that we're all in this together. When it's all said and done, we're all one big happy family. Whether we like it or not, we are. And it gives me a little bit of a calmness in that I know that over time, if you've got problems and you think, man, we're never going to work through this, or, we're never going to come out of this, in time and in enough prayer, there's another end of that tunnel. And I'm going through that with some other things right now. I'm trying to find the other end of that tunnel, but I know through prayer that it'll happen. And so that kind of gives me a calmness about going through the everyday things of how a town operates and how we have to do things. But mainly our faith teaches us how to treat people.
Absolutely.
And I would say too, years ago, the little sign, they called it Cookie Island, over by the old library. There was a sign that was erected in that little triangular part, Johnstown, the community that cares. And I think, that is exemplified by a number of people in the communities, and that just reverberates through so many different avenues of work and school and play and everything that happens, and that we're fortunate that we live in an area that we're surrounded by great people who are faith-minded, faithful, and that want to genuinely help other people for the greater good.
I walk by that sign almost. I walk by that sign almost every day. So So I should say, by the way, if you are watching online, there's a few of you out there, which is great. If you do have a question, you can post it as a comment on either Facebook or YouTube, and we will see that. So if you have a question or comment, feel free to do that. Okay, so in light of everything that you talked about, and I love, by the way, I love how much love you all have for this community. Like, it just shows. It just pours out of both of you, and I think that's wonderful, because I think people also. I think that's the other thing that it does. I think, again, especially a person of the Christian faith, which is basically, based on this crazy idea of loving God, loving neighbor, and loving yourself, right? It's all about it. People know if they're, if the person they're talking to actually cares, right? And has love in their heart for each other, has love in their heart for the community, or whatever it is they're doing. Like, people can tell, and that's such a big deal. And I think we maybe live in a time where people may be a little afraid, to love in some ways and put themselves out there. It feels risky, but I think we're called to do that. And I think, again, our faith gives us the power to do that. So on Tuesday, we're going to have an election. We are. So, no, my ballot's already in, and I haven't found the magic button to turn off all the phone calls and emails and everything yet, because I'm like, I'm done, man. I did my, but that's okay. We are, and as we said at the beginning, decent. No matter what way it goes, a number of people are going to be upset, a number of people are going to be happy. I guess what would you hope for this community? What would you hope our reaction to whatever the outcome is? I mean, we may not even know, we might not even know Tuesday night. We might not know till Wednesday or Thursday, or goodness knows. But what would you hope for us as a community would be our response, whatever the results on Tuesday are? And I'm going to put you on the spot, Mr. Mayor, and invite you to go first. But
well, I just want everybody to know that whatever day the decision is made, the next day the sun's going to come up, and it's going to be up for an X number of hours, and it's going to set, and then the next day is going to start, and life goes on. And I would just hope that people would put their differences aside and realize that there's a lot more to life than worrying about politics. Again, things will work out. We'll get along just fine. And this country is strong enough that if there is a problem, we'll fix it. Sooner or later, it'll get fixed. And I don't want neighbors to be mad at neighbors. I want people to realize that Johnstown's a great place to live, work, play, worship, and put this stuff behind you. It's not important. What we do every day in our own lives and what we makes ourselves happy and makes our family happy. That's what's important. That's important. This other stuff is, I call it noise. There's a lot of noise out there. We talked about that this morning, but just remember that there's more to life than politics. And life is a beautiful thing, and you shouldn't waste it on trivial political stuff that tries to get jammed down our throat. Just trust in God and love your family and your neighbor and move on. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that I would agree with Gary 100%. That some of the national stuff just has a tendency to consume lots of ideas and lives, and ultimately, how that translates down to our local communities. I think that we have to, again, be the change and interject that hope and that positivity, from our own homes, and that it just radiates out to those neighbors and to friends and families. I always, just because I'm a music person, I'm always looking for music analogies, or somebody could say something, and my response has always been, there's a song for that. And I think one of the songs that pops into my mind is "Let There Be Peace on Earth," and let it begin with me. That it really does have to start here, at home, so that it can just radiate out to everybody else. Because like Gary said, ultimately that noise can just consume us.
Chad, and I have a song that kind of gives me a little guidance, and I don't know all the words, but it says, if life gives you lemons, just put it in your tea. Right? I mean, that's what you do. You just take it for what it is and move on.
We have all become amazingly gourmet lemonade makers right now. I mean the amount of, oh my gosh. So yeah. Well, I appreciate all of that, and I do, and I would never want to, like, it's not that I personally, it's like, it's not that I don't think that things like national elections are important. I do, and I do think people should engage, and I think I guess we're seeing record voter turnout, and I think that's wonderful. I think the more people participate, the better. And if some of this is broken through some apathy around this, then maybe that's a good thing too. But at the end of the day, it's the person next to you that you're gonna, it's your neighbor next to you, or the one down the street that you're gonna live with on a day-to-day basis, right? You can turn off the TV host, and you probably should. We talked about that this morning too. But it's the person, your neighbor down the street, that may be mourning or maybe celebrating or whatever it is. And I think one of the things I would hope for us as a community, us as people of faith, is, it's not, whatever happens, it's not the time to spike the football, right? I mean, it's to recognize that, and maybe what I would hope we kind of learn from all this, and what I'm learning from this is, when we think about who we are and what our identities are and what labels we wear, somewhere along the way over the last, I don't know how many years, it just seems to me that, one of the most primary defining labels that we're all walking around with is a political affiliation. And I'm not quite sure how that happened, but I think we kind of need to walk back from that a little bit and recognize that our politics don't define us, right? I mean, that's not who we are. It's a part of who we are. It's an expression of who we are, right? It's a way of putting some of our values in action, whatever you want to think about it, but it's not the primary identity we have. And I think certainly as people of faith, our primary identity is beloved children of God, right? And that person that you're seeing down the street, and that person that's at, Hayes Market with you, and, having a bad day and is, yelling at the checkout person, the checkout person, and that person yelling is a beloved child of God. And how do we go from, how do we find sympathy in our hearts, for them? And I think that's, if we've got a challenge right now, it's a lack of sympathy and empathy, and that's, we got to rediscover that. And that's that all comes straight from honestly, from my personal, experience of faith, I think, is where that comes from. So to kind of close this out, you did get an amen, Gary, by the way. That's the one comment we got online is you got an amen, Mr. Mayor. So that's I like it. Here you go. I'm happy to share the amens. So in light of all this too, where would you point people for some hope, right? What are you seeing around? And I know you shared some of the great projects and stuff that are going on in town. I think that stuff's great. But like, where would you point somebody who kind of wants some hope in their neighbor, shall we say. Hope in one another, hope that we're going to get through this. You guys get to see a lot of different stuff and a lot of different people and be part of a lot of different groups. So where would you point somebody to see some hope right now?
I would point them towards the United Methodist Church Johnstown.
I did not pay you to say that.
Officer, because I think you bring what people need. And that is, we're all children of God. We're all in this together, and we're going to go through it together, and we're going to leave here together, and we'll always be together in the next life. So that's what I would do. Just stay true to your faith. Pray. Jeremy, you and I have had this discussion. Sometimes over the last few years, I didn't think prayer was really doing us a whole lot of good in my life, but I've since found that it's a pretty comforting thing to have. So that's what I would do. I would send them to church. I would send them to Pastor Jeremy and just have a cup of coffee with him, because when you leave, you just feel a lot better.
Pastor Appreciation Month was last month. It's not this month, but thank you. Thank you.
For me personally, I would say, again, being prayerful, but I also think too, that finding some of those people maybe that don't have some of that hope or faith, that those of us that do are just mindful of that, and that we're keeping an eye out for people, and that we're mindful of what's happening in the community and around us, and that we can point people into the direction, yes, of you, Pastor Jeremy. But again, for me, music is comfort and healing. It just speaks such a universal language, and we just open and positivity into our own lives, again, that it just radiates, and that if people can just pick up a glimpse of that, or take a piece of that, and that it just goes out and just keeps radiating, into others and out to others as well.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. No, I appreciated both of your answers. And sure, coming to church is always the right answer, especially when it's so easy right now. You just click the link. Right. But I think the other place that I personally have seen it is one of the other hats I wear, is as a school board member, is in our teachers and in our parents. And there was so much hand wringing at the beginning of the semester, and like, oh, the kids aren't going to leave the masks on, and what about this and what about that? And yeah, it was really, really hard. But I had faith in those folks, and I had faith in our in our faith in our parents, and faith in our teachers, and faith in our kids. And really, honestly, like, I'm astounded at the level of education that is still happening, that and how and even though things are changing daily, and they just changed again, that the resiliency that we are building. And I think this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity also to like build resiliency in our kids, and see that resiliency in them. Is also a place that I'm finding hope. I mean, probably the most hope I see is actually in our young people, and they're again they're just so they're rolling off, and they're being like, okay, so we're doing now. Okay, so we're doing now. All right, and the fact that I go pick up my daughter from school, and everyone's still off when they leave the school grounds, they're all smiling, right? And I can tell by the hell, right? I mean, kids, right? They're still they're still kids. They're getting in little skirmishes and fights with each other. It's just the hope I find is how normal it feels there, even though it feels really weirdly abnormal at the same time. Like, I think And I think that's super hopeful, because if we can be, as Christ said, right, those who have faith like a child, and I think that's the perfect example of it. I find a lot of hope right there.
Well, and I think we have to always keep in mind that life as we knew it and as we know it are two different things nowadays. And we've got to adjust. We've got to adjust for the positive, but we can't try to live in the past and what we're looking for going forward, to adjust, however that looks. But again, people have to have faith in each other that we'll get through it. It'll be fine. The sun's going to come up, believe me.
Yeah, as long as it's not orange again or whatever it was when it was all smoky. Right. There was a couple of days that I wasn't like, skip that. Great. I really appreciate you both and both like being a part of this. Do you have either you have any final thoughts you want to share as we wrap our time up this evening?
I would just say thanks for the opportunity to share. Again, we live in a pretty great place, and a town that we call home. Grateful for friends and neighbors, the people who live here, and make this crazy world go round. So thank you, Gary, and thanks to you, Pastor Jeremy, as well. Okay. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Chad and Pastor Jeremy, for having us. This was fun. I didn't know what to expect, and I had no idea what I was going to say. Maybe it made no sense. I don't know. We'll watch this tomorrow and think, my gosh, what was I thinking? But no, I think the only thing that we just need to keep in mind is we've got great people in this community. We really have to be thankful for the first responders, for our doctors and nurses and our police force and our town staff and the frontline workers in the town that make sure that the water comes on and the toilets flush and the parks are green and the roads are cleared off. And I think we just need to be joyful that we have that ability to enjoy those things. And this is a great country. This is a great town. And all this other stuff should not dictate how we live our lives.
I would agree. This was a very easy place to fall in love with when we got here. Even though, I mean, if we could just transfer this whole town back to the great state of Montana, then I think it would be like even better. But Colorado's okay. We're okay. We'll look forward to being here a good long time. Well, I want to thank you both, and I heard a lot of wisdom, Gary. That's all I heard tonight was a lot of wisdom, and from both of you, and I just really appreciate it, and I appreciate those who gathered and joined online who are part of this. The videos and recordings of this will be on our YouTube and our Facebook page. We will have an audio version of it on our podcast. You can search in your podcast apps for Become More, and you'll find our podcast there. And of course, you can find the church at johnstown.church on the website, and find about our online worship and all that we do. And a special shout out to Jana Hart, who's been behind the scenes pushing the buttons as she usually is, and does a wonderful job with that. So I just really appreciate her. So thank you to you both, and thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. This was great.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.